You are disappearing. And the most terrifying part is that nobody can see it happening. Not your family, not your friends, not even yourself. There's a silence that happens inside you that nobody can hear. It's not the absence of sound. It's the absence of yourself. It begins so quietly that you don't notice it's happening. A small moment where you don't speak up. A conversation where you swallow your words. A truth you keep to yourself because saying it out loud feels too dangerous. And then it happens again and again until one day you realize that the voice that used to speak your truth, the voice that knew what you wanted, what you needed, what you believed, has become so small that you can barely hear it yourself. This is what it means to lose your voice, not literally, but to lose the authority you have over your own truth, to lose the capacity to speak what's real inside you, to lose the permission you give yourself to exist fully, authentically, loudly, to become a person who nods instead of speaks, who agrees instead of questions, who stays silent instead of standing up. And the cruelest part is that this happens slowly enough that you might not even realize it as happening until you try to speak one day and find that you don't know how anymore. The silence creeps in like fog. You don't notice it until you're lost inside it. Your voice is not just words. Your voice is your truth. It's the thing inside you that knows what you actually want, what actually matters to you, what you actually believe. Your voice is the boundary between who you are and who the world wants you to be. Your voice is the difference between living your own life and living someone else's version of your life. And when you lose your voice, you lose all of it. You lose access to yourself. You become a hollow thing, a person shaped entirely by what others need from you, a reflection instead of a source, a response instead of an initiation. The erosion of your voice doesn't happen in a moment. It happens in 1,000 small moments. It happens the first time someone shames you for speaking your mind. It happens the first time you realize that telling the truth has consequences. It happens the first time you discover that your needs matter as much as someone else's comfort. It happens every time you choose silence over confrontation. Every time you choose peace over truth. Every time you choose their approval over your own integrity. And slowly, layer by layer, moment by moment, your voice gets smaller. Your truth gets quieter. Yourself gets dimmer. You become less yourself. There are forces that silence you. Some of them are external. Other people who have power over you. People who punish you for speaking. People who twist your words or diminish your truth. People who make it unsafe to be yourself. People whose love is conditional on your silence. But some of the most powerful silencing happens internally. It happens in your own mind. It happens when you've been told so many times that you're wrong, that you stop believing in your own perceptions. It happens when you've been shamed so many times for your desires that you stop honoring them. It happens when you've been rejected so many times for your authenticity that you stop trying to be authentic. Your own mind becomes the prison. Your own doubt becomes the guard. Fear is what holds the prison door closed. Fear of rejection. Fear of abandonment. Fear of being too much or not enough. Fear of speaking and being heard, or speaking and being ignored. Fear of losing people you love if you disagree with them. Fear of losing your place in the world if you claim too much space. Fear so deep and so silent that you don't even recognize it as fear anymore. You just recognize it as the way things are, the way you've learned to survive, the way you've learned to be safe. And so you stay silent, and the silence becomes comfortable, and comfortable becomes normal, and normal becomes who you think you are. But it's not who you are. It's who you've learned to pretend to be. But underneath the silence, there's pain. Underneath the comfort, there's a pressure building. You feel it sometimes. A tightness in your chest when you don't say what you're thinking. A hollowness in your belly when you smile and agree while your inside is screaming. A heaviness in your throat that comes from words you didn't speak. A numbness that comes from being disconnected from yourself for so long that you won't remember what your own voice sounds like. You carry this pain quietly. You hide it from everyone. You might even hide it from yourself, but it's there, always there. A wound that's been bleeding silently for so long that you've forgotten how to bleed loudly. The pain becomes your baseline. The silence becomes your natural state. If you feel that your voice has already become too small, if you recognize yourself in this silence, if you feel that pressure building in your chest, if you know what it's like to swallow words that needed to be spoken, if you've chosen comfort over truth so many times that you don't know the difference anymore, if you're carrying the weight of everything you haven't said, if you're exhausted from being small, if something in this is touching a part of you that you've been ignoring, don't turn away from it now. Stay with me. Stay with this feeling. Because the first step toward finding your voice again is recognizing that you've lost it. And the first step toward speaking your truth is admitting that you haven't been speaking it. And the first step toward healing is facing the silence without flinching. This is the moment. This is where it starts. The tragedy is that you've learned to mistake your own smallness for safety. You've learned to call your silence wisdom. You've learned to call your compliance strength. You've learned to survive by erasing yourself. And now you don't even know who you are beneath all that erasure. You don't know what your voice sounds like because you haven't let it speak. You don't know what you actually want because you've spent so long wanting what others need from you. You don't know what you actually believe because you've been shaped by everyone else's beliefs for so long. You've become a question mark where you should be a period. A maybe where you should be a yes or a no. A mirror that reflects everyone else's truth but has forgotten to reflect your own. You've disappeared without going anywhere. This is the silent catastrophe. This is the erosion that nobody can see from the outside. You might look fine. You might sound fine. You might seem like you have your life together. But inside, something essential is missing. Inside, there's a vast and aching silence. Inside, you're drowning in the space between who you are and who you've been forced to pretend to be. And the water is so warm and so familiar that sometimes you forget you're drowning at all. You just float there. Silent. Small. Safe. Dead. And everyone around you thinks you're refined because they can't see the drowning that is happening in the quiet dark of your own interior. But something inside you still remembers. Something inside you still knows that there's a voice there. Something inside you is still trying to speak. And that's what makes this unbearable. Because you can't fully disappear, you can't fully erase yourself. There's still a part of you that knows what you want. There's still a part of you that knows what's true. There's still a part of you that wants to speak. And so you live in constant friction. Constant conflict. Constant tragedy. You live between who you are and who you're allowed to be, and the space between those two things is widening. The gap is growing. And you're disappearing into it slowly, silently, almost What happens inside you when you lose your voice is a slow reorganization of your entire system. Your mind adapts to the reality that speaking brings danger. So It stops trying to speak. It stops generating thoughts that might conflict with what's around you. It learns to anticipate what others need before you even know what you need. Your consciousness becomes colonized. It becomes a place where other people's voices speak louder than your own. You learn to read the room instead of reading yourself. You learn to mirror instead of reflect. You become a finely tuned instrument for detecting and meeting the needs of everyone around you. And in the process, you lose the ability to detect and meet your own needs. Your intuition rewires itself. It stops pointing you toward what's true for you. It starts pointing you toward what's safe for everyone else. The mind is an extraordinary organ. It has the capacity to adapt to almost anything. Give it a situation where speaking truth brings rejection, and it will learn not to speak truth. Give it a situation where being yourself brings abandonment, and it will learn not to be yourself. Give it a situation where your needs are consistently overridden, and it will learn not to have needs. Or rather, it will learn not to acknowledge that it has needs. The needs are still there, but you stop listening to them. You develop what feels like an absence of desire, what feels like contentment with whatever is given to you, what feels like peace. But it's not peace. It's numbness. It's disassociation. It's a profound disconnection from the thing that makes you alive, your own wow, your own truth, your own voice. This is how manipulation works at the deepest level, not through force. Force would activate resistance. You would know you're being attacked, and you would fight back. But manipulation works through subtlety, through gradual shifts in what you think is possible, through the slow erosion of your confidence in your own perceptions, through the daily message that you're wrong or selfish or too much or not enough, through the implication that the people you love would leave if you were truly yourself, through the repeated experience that when you speak your truth, something bad happens. And so you stop speaking your truth. And then you stop thinking your truth. And then you stop knowing your truth. And then you stop having a truth. Or so it seems. But the truth is still there. It's still alive inside you. It's just been driven underground. It's become the part of you that you don't listen to anymore. The part of you that whispers when everyone else is shouting. The part of you that tries to get your attention in dreams and anxiety and the persistent feeling that something is wrong. The voice doesn't disappear. It just gets quieter. It gets locked away in the basement of your consciousness. And you spend all your energy learning not to hear it, learning to ignore it, learning to survive without it. This is the adaptation that's so devastating, because it happens so gradually and so completely that you forget that you were ever different. You forget that there was ever a you that spoke freely. You forget what it felt like to trust your own instincts. You forget what your authentic desire tastes like. And so you think this is just who you are. You think being small is your natural state. You think being quiet is your personality. You think being accommodating is your strength. You build an entire identity around the erosion of your real identity. You make a self out of the absence of yourself, and you defend this false self fiercely because it's become the only self you know. The people around you might not even notice the change. They might notice that you're easier to be around, that you're less complicated, that you don't challenge them anymore, that you're more focused on their needs, that you're more compliant, that you're more manageable. They might actually prefer this version of you. The smaller version, the quieter version, the version that doesn't make them uncomfortable. And so they do nothing to encourage you to find your voice again. In fact, they might actively discourage it, not because they're evil, but because your smallness serves them. Your silence makes their lives easier. Your self-erasure is convenient for everyone except you. And here's the cruelest part. Eventually you internalize this. You become your own oppressor. You won't need anyone else to silence you anymore because you've become an expert at silencing yourself. When your voice starts to rise, you push it back down. When your truth starts to surface, you cover it up. When your needs start to assert themselves, you dismiss them. You do the work for them. You police yourself. You silenced yourself. You become the god of your own prison. And by the time you realize what's happened, you've lost the ability to even want to get out. Because escape would require having a self that wants something different. And you've spent so long learning not to have a self that wants anything. The erosion is so efficient. It doesn't leave obvious scars. It leaves a kind of smoothness. Flatness. A sense of being accommodating and agreeable and not making waves. You look at yourself in the mirror and you can't quite recognize the person looking back. Not because something is obviously wrong, but because there's something obviously absent. There's a light that should be there, but isn't. There's a sharpness that's been dulled. There's an energy that's been subdued. You've become a person who is easier to be around, which means you've become a person who is less alive. But you've learned to call this peace. You've learned to call this maturity. You've learned to call this growth, but it's not peace. It's surrender. It's the quietness of a person who has stopped fighting for themselves. It's the compliance of a person who has accepted their own invisibility. It's the calm of a person who has given up. And sometimes, lachi night, or in a moment when someone unexpectedly treats you with genuine kindness and respect, something inside you cracks. Something inside you remembers. Your voice tries to speak. Your truth tries to surface. Your real self tries to emerge from wherever you've hidden it. And the pain of feeling that the gap between who you are and who you've been forced to pretend to be is so overwhelming that you might want to crush it back down. You might want to silence it again. It's almost easier to stay numb. It's almost easier to stay small. It's almost easier to keep pretending. But here's what actually happens when your voice tries to speak. When your truth tries to surface, when your real self tries to emerge, something shifts. Something that was asleep starts to wake up. Something that was dead starts to move. And once something starts to move, you can't fully make it sleep again. You can try. You can spend tremendous energy trying, but part of you will always remember that there was a spark, that there was a moment when you felt alive, that there was a possibility that you might be more than this small, accommodating version of yourself. And that memory will haunt you. It will whisper to you in the spaces between moments. It will call to you from the depths. And one day, when you're ready, when you're desperate enough, when the cost of your own silence becomes higher than the cost of breaking it one day, you might answer that call. You might choose to speak. You might choose to be yourself. And when you do, everything will change. But the change doesn't begin outside you. It begins in that moment of recognition. That moment when you admit to yourself, I have lost my voice and I want it back. This is not a small thing. This is the beginning of everything. This is the moment where your life splits into before and after. Before you admitted it, after you admitted it, and in between, there is possibility, there is the glimmer of a foot.